So you want to learn full stack, and these might be React or Vue with Node or Firebase. It doesn't matter. You want to learn how to make an app from start to finish, the front end and the back end. But it is hard to know where the finish goal is. So where can I say I've learned enough that I can do almost anything that I want. So in this video I want to show you in simple terminology and by giving you projects as examples what level you are at the moment and what level you want to go to. So this way you'll be able to better comprehend where you stand in that specific full stack project that you are developing, and that way you can gain some knowledge for it. I'm SimCoder, and these are the 6 project levels to master full stack. So I've developed these guidelines in a way where with each step that you take, with each project that you do, you gain some other baggage in order to actually do something new. So whether it is databases, whether it is UI, whether it is storage, whether it is sockets, whatever. So this is incremental so that with each project you can gain some different knowledge about a specific thing when it comes to any full stack that you are developing on. Again, whether it is MERN or Mean, whatever, even if you are just developing an app with React Native or Flutter, this can also serve as a guideline for that. So I develop a star system for this, and the most amount of stars there is, the harder the project is and the more knowledge you have to have in order to actually develop it. So the first project is 1 star, and this is tic-tac-toe. And I know it might sound really basic, but if you don't have any previous knowledge about programming, tic-tac-toe is actually great in order to get some syntax knowledge about a specific programming language and to start dipping your toes into a programming language. Even if you are developing for a full stack like Mean or MERN, and let's talk about MERN because that's the one that I'm most used to, you can actually develop tic-tac-toe using a grid of buttons and just do really basic stuff where you just want to learn how to do basic placement of UI elements and some basic syntax knowledge in order to actually make sure that the users are playing the game as intended. You can even take it a step back and not use UI at all, just use the console log for that. But I would suggest actually start playing with UI as it doesn't add that much difficulty to the project. Again, this is a really basic game to start developing. It was with tic-tac-toe that I started learning Java. It was the first thing that I did because it just felt basic, it felt good, and it felt like something that's reachable within a day's worth of programming and learning a programming language. So with 2 stars, we have a basic note-taking app. In this note-taking app, you will start to do a lot more of UI elements, adding some buttons, adding a list, which is really important, and it's something that you'll do for basically all your life as a full stack developer, for most things actually. So it is something that's really important to get used to and get good at. One other thing is, don't worry about saving anything to any database, to any storage. Don't save anything. Just make sure you make some UI elements that feel good, that make sense, that everything is refactored so that the code is comprehensible and clean. For this step, we are really focusing just on the UI, but it is better to take that out of your hands right now, as it is pretty much simpler than the backend and database logic. So yeah, in this part, just focus about the UI elements and how to create lists, add, remove items, and all of that. So yeah. Next up, we have the 3-star project. So for this, you can actually do one of 2 things. You can pick up the note-taking app that you did previously and add database system to it so that you can store the notes somewhere within the database, whether it is Firebase, whether it is Mongo, whether it is an SQL database. Just save the note somewhere. The logic for this is really simple, and the UML for the database structure, I can guarantee you it's pretty basic as it gets even. However, if you want to spice things up, and if you are, for example, working with MERN, I would suggest do a link shortener because this will give you some really good comprehension about routes within an app or with a web page, whatever you are doing, so that it gives you a lot of tools when it comes to that. It also gives you some database knowledge, which in this part you should be starting to get some, learn how to use a database and how to structure a database. So yeah, it is a really good project that mixes both of them. And that way you are actually able to emulate websites that already exist, which is really good because you feel like you are actually doing something that's of value and all of that. So it is a no-brainer for this part. You should be able to do this as the database is pretty simple. One other thing that you can also do is to learn how to deploy this project to a VM, to a hosting service like Firebase hosting, so that you can actually start learning how to do CI with your project, which is a really important part of DevOps. And DevOps, if you don't know, is developer operations, which is all the stuff that as developers we do around the project in order to make sure it will deploy correctly into a server, or it will be correctly handled by the development team, all of that. So a lot of testing and whatnot. So it is a really important step that you should take. And there are a bunch of tools that help you do that, like Heroku, like Firebase hosting, and you can even deploy them, most projects, on a simple VM, so no need to worry about that. So now that we have our basic database structure and we've learned how to make HTTP requests in the free start project, let's jump on and go to the next step. The next step, the 4-star project, is an image storage system. And by that, I mean something that's quite similar to Google Photos. So you just want to store images somewhere and get a list of the images to preview them, download an image, and stuff like that. So what's added in here? We are still using a database for this. We are still using HTTP requests for this. However, we have one thing more on top of it, which is the cloud storage service that we'll be using in order to store the images somewhere. So this is something that's trivial if you get used to it. However, in the beginning, it can be a bit tricky to learn how to actually send an image to a server, store them there, and then fetch that image back from the server. You have a bunch of services that will help you do this, like Google Cloud Storage, like Firebase Storage, which is pretty similar to Google Cloud Storage. So you have a bunch of tools that will help you do this. And this way you'll learn something new and we'll work on reaching the end goal, which is the 6-star project, which we'll talk about later. But for now, let's jump on to the 5-star project. And for this, I want you to learn something which is a bit tricky to comprehend at first. However, it brings so many advantages, and for some projects, it is something that you really have to use, which are sockets. And for this project, and in order to learn how sockets work, my advice is to build a chat project. So a live chat project, for example. No need to do anything fancy, just with the name of the user, and you don't even need authentication for this. Just send images and receive them in a chat system. This will teach you how to use sockets and some other basic stuff like handling big lists and things like that, which isn't that different from handling smaller lists. However, you can do it in a way where it is optimized and actually worry about that at the moment so that you can make sure the lists are not laggy and stuff like that. So with sockets, you just basically have a constant flow of information between the server and the user. This means that you don't need to do an HTTP request in order to fetch some information from the database. It is automatically retrieved to you as soon as the server wants to. So whenever user A sends an image to the chat, the server will automatically send that image to user B, and user B can see the messages were sent from user A automatically without having to do another HTTP request, which is awesome and is something that's really important. For example, Firebase does this really well with Firestore and real-time database. However, everything is abstracted, so if you really want to learn how to use sockets in a good way, then implement your own server, for example, with Node.js, and try to implement a socket. It is simple and it is something that's doable. However, it is something that you should dedicate a project to because it has some logic associated with it, which you should know about. And now we've reached the 6-star project. And what is the 6-star project that I've been talking about? Well, it is a social media app because it implements everything that you've learned thus far in all other levels. So you are proving that you are able to handle almost anything that a full stack developer should be able to do. It is really, really important. And if you are able to reach this point where you are able to do a social media app, then you are able to do anything. Just think about it. You have image storage, you have database, you have HTTP requests, you have sockets if you want to implement a live view of a feed, for example. You have so much stuff, you have complicated UI. So by you being able to do a social media app, you are able to do anything. And for this reason, it is the last one. And one other thing that it implements on top of everything else that we did is authentication, and actually learn how to manage users in a good way. So it is such a great project to do if you are trying to prove to yourself that you are able to do something, and even if you are trying to prove others that you are really good at programming, especially for full stack projects. Obviously, if you are learning Python, then it would be harder to do this, or R, for example. But for full stack developers, this is the end goal, and this is something that you should strive for. So, if you enjoyed this video, then please do leave it a like and subscribe so that you don't miss any single video in the future. If you have any suggestions, then please leave them down below in the comment section, and I'll make sure to read them through and respond to any single comment that you do. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. Ciao!